Welcome to Symplicity Conversations, the podcast where business, culture, and community come together to inspire and empower. I'm your host, Catherine Ripley. Each week, we'll explore meaningful conversations about how today's business landscape is shaped by innovation, relationships, and the people behind the progress. From actionable insights and stories from industry leaders to topics like customer experience, fostering strong business relationships, and the role of automation, we've got you covered. Whether you're an entrepreneur navigating growth, a leader focused on building lasting connections, or someone interested in how culture and community drive success, Symplicity Conversations is here to guide you. If you're ready to turn challenges into opportunities and make meaningful strides in your business and community, subscribe now and join the conversation. Get ready to simplify complexity and make an impact with Symplicity Conversations. Welcome to Symplicity Conversations, where we explore the intersection of business, leadership, and technology. Today, I'm joined by Stephen Hackett, founder of 186 Cloud, a company dedicated to providing cutting-edge IT solutions. We'll hear about his journey of building 186 Cloud, the evolving landscape of cybersecurity, and what businesses need to do to stay ahead of the ever-changing tech world. But first, let's dive into our Symplicity insights. This is our opportunity to talk about a famous quote. Today's quote is from Wendy Nather. Security isn't just a technology problem, it's a people problem. And Stephen, how true is that? A people problem, right?
100%.
Yeah. So be sure to subscribe to Symplicity Conversations and hear more from leaders shaping the future of business and technology. So Stephen, you're over in London right now, or near outside of London.
Yeah, about 70 miles east of London. So, within stone's throwing distance, I guess, compared to you.
Yeah. So we've known each other about 8 years now, I'd say.
We have.
Yeah. We met a long time ago when you worked with the company called Enthusiast in their UK branch. And we've got some funny stories there, don't we?
We have some nostalgic and great time, behind us and ahead of us.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about what inspired you to establish 186 Cloud and how did your vision for the company come about?
Yeah, really good question. So as you know, so for the sake of the audience, who are listening to this. So as you say, we've known each other for about 8 years. Back in 2016, a guy called J.R. Cook, who's still with Intelisys and a great friend to us both, reached out to me. I'd known J.R. for a little while prior to the company I was working for at that time, because I'd worked for Level 3 Communications and got to become aware of the US trusted advisor market. Mm-hmm. And JR reached out to me and said, "Hey, Stephen, do you think the UK will be ready for the trusted advisor, vendor agnostic telecoms agent model that we've got running over here?" And I said, well, look, the world's changing. Maybe a couple of years ago, not so much, because, we didn't have market-facing, customer-facing solutions that carriers were selling at that time. We need resellers in the market to build solutions for those carriers. But that market's changing because of the cloud. Maybe the time is right. We talked a bit more, and eventually we agreed the time was right. And eventually JR and the team at Intelisys said, "And would you run the business for us if we started it?" And I said, "I thought you'd never ask." And so I started Intelisys, and JR came for a little while over and helped me get it going. And that was my first full-time immersion into the world of the trusted advisor, the vendor agnostic technology advisor world. And I've been, I worked for Intelisys for a couple of years. Intelisys then sold the business to ScanSource. I ran it for a couple of years inside ScanSource, ScanSource Cloud Services. But during that time, I started to think that, I think the UK model for it to be successful is going to need something else that we weren't doing at the time. I think the problem was back then we were, to a degree, running it in the way that America ran its trusted advisor model, and we were missing bits, missing components. And I decided that the best way for me to to pursue that vision was to leave and start 186 Cloud. So I started 186 Cloud as, to all intents and purposes, a new version of Intelisys that did something different. And the difference was providing coaching and mentoring to the partners. And that was the one thing that was really missing, because in the States, it's been, the model's been around for a while, and Intelisys has heaps of vendors, runs heaps of events, as does the competition, the other technology services distributors. But here, the partners needed some guidance. They needed somebody who could help them create a vision and pursue that vision. And that's what we do as 186 Cloud. And we did that. We did that for the first couple of years. And then during that process, we started to observe that we were getting our sleeves rolled up and involved in opportunities for the partners. And that was fine. It was great to help the partners, but we were having customers reach out to us through reputation. And it still happens now. Only last week, I got an invite from a 5,000 employee financial trading organization that have asked us to go into a meeting with them to do some evaluation of their tech strategy, right? So customers have started to reach out to us and ask us if we could get involved. So we did, right? So we actually have a direct practice, and we're pursuing that as well ourselves now. Why? Because we enjoy it and we seem to add value. So that's 186 Cloud.
So I know that in the U.S. market, we've had the direct side and the indirect side. That's really, we are on the indirect side when we are agents. A direct rep is somebody who is employed by the company, whether it's an AT&T or a Comcast. So we were a little more mature in our direct and indirect side. So it's almost like the UK now is just a little behind. They had only direct, and then you started with the agents, and it takes time to build that trust with clients understanding what is an agent. But I think here, the last statistics that I saw was that I think 67% of technology services are bought through the indirect side of the house. So, these service providers want to work with us, but there still is that level that you've got to create that trust with the clients to let them know what's happening here. So let's talk a little bit about some of your significant milestones in your journey. Clearly, starting off doing more of a master agent model, but then kind of now direct. So talk about a little bit of those significant milestones.
Yeah. So, I think I touched on it in a few moments ago. We started to see those milestones approaching. I think the quote goes something along the lines of little by little, then all at once. We started to see the milestones approaching us in terms of the projects we were getting involved in, where we were getting our sleeves rolled up and we were speaking to the end customer for the partners. We were coaching the partners. And then we started to have customers approach us and ask us to go and run the whole project. And I think probably one of the first ever milestones for me was a personal one, where you think that I've always been channel. In my technology career, I've always worked in channel. I was on the other side of the fence looking after. If I was in the States, right, I'd be a partner manager. I'd be looking after you. That was my previous career. So always in channel. I'd never ever spoken to a customer until I started the Intelisys business. And even then, I would, to try and show partners how to do it, I would speak to their customers for them. And so the first milestone for me was actually realizing I was good at this. I could do this. I understood customers. I had empathy with them. I could see their challenge. And I guess I saw their challenge because I'd had so many roles where I'd been in channel and I'd sat with partners in customer meetings to appreciate their challenges. And I'd often been in situations where I could see an account manager for one of our partners talking to a customer. Let's say we're a reseller partner. Let's say I work for Level 3 Communications, and the partner sold Level 3 connectivity. And they'd sit in front of a customer, and the customer would describe their problem. And you could see the account manager struggling because she knew that their solution wasn't quite what the customer was looking for. And I remember thinking back then, imagine if you had all of your competitors' products in your satchel as well, in your back pocket as well. Wouldn't that make you a formidable account manager, salesperson to help the customer? So it was realizing then that the sales model, the technology selling model was flawed, and wondering if there was an opportunity. So one of the first milestones was actually finding out about Intelisys and finding out about the model. And then, as I say, getting into customer conversations and realizing that, you no longer had to try and sell to a customer 9/10 of what they want and hope they would buy the other 10th. That in this model, you literally could just spend your time listening to the customer, look at thinking about their exact solution, and then going into your ecosystem of vendors and bringing them the perfect solution. And then once you focus on the perfect solution, being the ambassador back to the vendor to get them the best commercials. That was one of the first milestones, realizing the value of this model and how we could help customers. And as I say, realizing that actually I could do this, and I had empathy with customers, and that set me on the path to success.
Great. Now, with our businesses, it's always hard to describe what we do. So talk about, what is it that you do? What technologies do you bring forth?
Yeah. And that's changed, right? Because again, I remember when we first started as Intelisys, we essentially offered three technologies, and they were unified communications, connectivity, and data center. And so customers in those days used to buy co-location. And the cloud's changed that, right? Because the cloud providers now buy the colo, and they build solutions in the colo. But then they were the three solutions, and then contact center came along. And so it was UC, it was contact center, it was connectivity, not so much data center. And then cybersecurity started to come along. So for a number of years, they were the four pillars, the four technology pillars. And then in the last year and a bit, that's changed massively, because now we're selling AI as it affects customer experience. So we call it CXAI. So we now provide a vast array of AI solutions for customer experience. So now we're doing UC, unified communications, contact center, cybersecurity, connectivity, and connectivity could be internet connectivity, it could be wide area connectivity, and CX and AI.
Yeah, automation and AI. I'm sure we're going to get into more of that, because it's just they're just such big words. But the IT infrastructure really has been evolving rapidly, especially the last 24 months. And companies really are under a lot of pressure to keep up. In your experience, what's the biggest shift that businesses have had to adapt in the recent years?
I think COVID was probably the first biggest sea change. As we know that before COVID, organizations were starting to think about how they could utilize cloud-based communications platforms to be more successful. And they were still hanging on to their on-prem technology, and that you see as an example of that.
Right.
Their contact centers were primarily based in what I call silos in a building. If they had a contact center, they had a contact center then was a couple of hundred people in a building. And they might have an on-prem telephone system that worked, because most of the people were based in the office, and the telephone system served those people. If they were out and about, so they weren't in the office, then they had their desk phone on forward to mobile, so they were able to receive their calls. So that worked. And then COVID came along, and all of a sudden, overnight, you had, if they were lucky and they were still in the office, or they had an IT person in the office able to go around their handsets and forward their handsets to their individual mobiles, during the next 2 years, I think it was, where people were at home, they were able to receive phone calls. And we went through a transitionary period where a lot of organizations started to believe that they didn't do telecoms anymore. They didn't need telephony, because during COVID, they managed and they were still successful. And what they didn't realize, that whilst they weren't using the old-fashioned way of communicating, they were using a new way. The new way was Teams, it was Zoom, it was video meetings. They were communicating with colleagues like that. They were communicating with some customers like that. But what they were missing was the ability for a customer to reach out to somebody in the organization and for that call, for example, to be forwarded to them. Because if it landed through a desk phone on somebody's mobile, that person would then say, you don't need to speak to me, you need to speak to Billy. Sorry, I can't put you through. I'll send him an email. So there was a breakdown in the way organizations communicated, and they still thought that they didn't need it. But as organizations started to return back to work and realized that they were more of a hybrid organization, they then started to think about how they needed communications as part of their forward-looking strategy. And at the same time, they then started to think about actually all of our people who would deal with inbound inquiries, who are like contact center people. They're all based all over the place. So now we need technology that can support them as well, and that's contact center technology. So you started to see a kind of like an evolution in the way that people thought about telecommunications and communications. And then on top of that, you had the cybersecurity compounded and made things more, added an extra dimension to the IT departments and the strategic people's things that they need to worry about, because all of a sudden the applications that they were using weren't in a cupboard at the back of the office anymore. They're in the cloud. Right. And so cybersecurity no longer was a box issue, i.e. a firewall. It was a people issue. It was a triage, as we mentioned at the start of the call, so the conversation. It was a people issue. It was a retraining issue, making people think about their habits and what they did and how they potentially made the organization vulnerable because they weren't demonstrating the right behavior. And I think what we've seen is just how much technologies are changing because the way we work is changing and the way that the technologies are delivered to us is changing, and it all presents its own challenges. And we as a community, we work through that and we help customers address those challenges and run towards adversity and deal with them head on.
Yeah, definitely. The complexities of purchasing technology. Who do I purchase from? What products should I be purchasing? I think that certain technology advisors have that edge when you layer in the integrity of I'm gonna put the right products in front of clients, instead of just something that's going to commission me well. And I think that what I've seen in the transition is people need to purchase differently. They can't purchase the technology the way they did 10 years ago, and we're actually seeing a shift over here in the U.S. that 10 years ago when we went from even 15 years ago, we went from, spending money on CapEx to spending money on, OpEx side. It was a shift. We started seeing the IT departments reporting to the CFOs because it was now an operating expense and it was a different category, on the financials. But I think that, there's much more to it in terms of now what we're seeing is marketing actually holding the budget for technology products, because when you think about what our products do is it emphasizes and highlights the conversations between the customers, and typically marketing owns that area. So it's this really interesting shift that's happened since I've owned my company. This is the 19th year of who are we talking to and who should we be talking to? And it's really, discussions are more of a committee decision more than ever. I mean, early on in my career, it was just the one guy, maybe you had his boss, but now it's by committee. Do you see that as well, that shift from IT to finance to marketing?
Yeah, absolutely. And wider, right? Because the cloud solutions that our vendors can provide, they not only impact IT, the sales teams, the customer support teams, the marketing people, but even HR as well. So we see us getting involved in many conversations to make sure that the organization is happy with the vendor that they're selecting for the next 3, 5, even longer years, because the solutions that they buy become so integrated with so many of their procedural and operational applications that they need to make sure that those vendors fit in with their own strategic roadmap. they can't afford to be selecting a vendor that 2 years in they're having to unpick and go and select another one. Mm-hmm. It's got to be a vendor for the long term. I think I remember 5-6 years ago reading something by Gartner, and they suggested that they could see customers staying with their cloud vendor for 7 to 10 years, if it was the right relationship. And it's in our interest, isn't it, to make sure that these customers are happy with that vendor. Mm-hmm. And that's part of our role, sticking around post-sale to make sure that they're getting out of the relationship beyond the contract what the glossy brochure promised as well: the relationship, the adoption, the support, the experience, and we stick around to make sure that happens. But in the process of getting them on board, yes, to answer your question, we're having to get involved in so many conversations. I can remember go back 15-20 years ago, and I worked for a channel company that sold plain old telephone services. Mm-hmm. And I used to train the new starters of the channel partners, and we used to literally go out with a notebook and a pen and walk around the streets of London, walking into buildings where they had a receptionist and asking for the name of the office manager, because it was the office manager in those days who was responsible for the telephone system. Because then the telephone system was a box on the wall that used least cost routing to save money. So we were basically trying to give them a new carrier that would save them more money, because the office manager was responsible for saving money and running costs of the office. So that's who dealt with IT back then, right. A telephone system. But now it's changed massively, So more recently, it was the IT department that dealt with the move from an on-prem telephone system to the cloud, because it used their connectivity. But I've been involved in conversations recently where we started off with the IT manager about a move from on-prem to the cloud. Very quickly, we're speaking to the C-levels because it impacts the strategy. Mm-hmm. And so if we don't pick out the conversations at the start, you can be sure that if we're doing a good job, we will get dragged into the other conversations, because other people will see value in the conversations we're having. So it's actually in our interest and their interest for us to go and seek out those people to make sure as many people are involved as possible.
I think that's the main difference of direct selling agents versus the indirect agents, is the relationships that we build with our clients. We are neutral, so we can come in and say, here's the top 3 or 5 UCaaS providers, but we can describe why they should go down the avenue of one versus the other. Maybe there's something that's important in their environment that this one will work better than that one. And if I'm working directly for that one provider, they're not going to bring that up. They're just going to plow forward to get signature. Yeah. So the relationship that we create with clients before the sale, if you will, where we get the signature, we don't stop there. We help make sure that implementation goes smooth, that their invoicing is correct, because number one, it's the right thing to do. And that's always what makes technology hard, is you can choose and negotiate a good rate on a circuit or a UCaaS product or a contact center product. But the hard stuff is the implementation and then getting the invoices right. So I think we talk about, that's really the differentiator. But how do you approach building and nurturing those partnerships so that you can really enhance the services that you bring to the table?
So the partnerships are multi-level, right? We've got partnerships with the vendors. We've got and the partnership is with the customer as well, because they're not buying anything off us. So it's definitely a partnership. They need to have faith that we're going to bring the best of the market, the best of the technology market to them, and the best commercials to them. And so that takes a while for them to understand what we do and have faith in what we do. So we have to build a relationship with them. We have to build a partnership with them. One of the things we explain to a customer, and we explain why we stick around post their acquisition of a solution, is that we'll say to them that I'm sure in your career, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, you've experienced having bought a solution and signed a 3-year contract, and 6 months into the contract or a year into the contract, the account manager's not there anymore. And all of a sudden you've got a new account manager. You have to renew your relationship and your importance of you as a customer to the vendor, and for them to appreciate that. Well, because we're involved, there's none of that isn't required. Because we will make sure that when the new account manager comes in, they get how important you are, because we'll help them understand, that what you need, your special needs as a customer. So we give you continuation. When you explain that to customers, they love it. They see the value in it. The fact that we can bring, an agnostic appraisal of the market to them, that because we have no vested interest in any vendor, actually our interest is in them, they appreciate that as well. And then you've got the partnership with the vendor. Sometimes because we spend a lot of our time looking out to the technology market to make sure that we've got the most appropriate vendors in our ecosystem, sometimes we'll speak to a new vendor, especially in the developing and evolving markets around CX and AI, where we'll speak to a vendor who may have not heard of our model before. And then when we explain to them the array and the depths of vendors that we have in their technology area, they might be taken aback initially, and they may ask questions along the lines of, why would we want to come into your ecosystem when all of our competition are in your ecosystem as well? And once we explain to them, because of the quantity and the quality of the opportunities that come to us, because of that, they get it. The best analogy I use for that is, I liken it to when you go on holiday and the evening comes and you're Mediterranean, you're a Caribbean resort, and you decide to walk down the street of the restaurants to go and find something to eat for dinner. What you don't do is go down a side street where there's one restaurant. You actually go down the street where all the restaurants are, and you walk up and down until you found one. That's what our customers are doing, and that's why our vendors need to be in that main street, and we're the main street. And so we're continually developing relationships with the vendors, helping them understand the markets that they can get access to. They see us as an extra safe pair of hands around the customer that we're speaking to, and we become a customer of theirs. They appreciate the fact that they get an extra account manager in the relationship. So we're having to work at multi levels around building those partnerships. And it's not a one-time job. It's a working piece of it's a working project.
Well, I always call it a three-legged stool, right? The customer, the provider, and Symplicity, or 186 Cloud. Our job is to be their advocate. Our job is to educate, not sell. We want to educate them on the project that they're trying to solve, the pain, so that they can make a good decision. And it's really important that's what builds trust. When you're not just selling, you're helping them solve the issue, and then you're staying. So I love that our relationships, I have clients that I've had before I started my company 19 years ago that I still work with, because they know when they come to me, I'm going to say, here's the information. This is what I know. We spend a lot of time training. I would say 30 to 40% of our time is spent talking to service providers, going to these conferences. So how do you stay in front of the emerging trends that are happening, or how do you stay relevant for your clients?
I get up early. I think honestly, it's a big part of it, right? Because 9 till 5 is dealing with customers, dealing with prospects, dealing with customers. It's the time outside of that we spend on investing in ourselves. I get up at 7 a.m. every day to try and work through these that are on my desk every morning. So I do half an hour reading with coffee in the morning, and it's either a pile of books on my table, or it's the newsletters that come into my inbox every day. And we have to be selective about what we read, because there's so many of them. But it's identifying those newsletters that have the content that's relevant to where we are in our learning at the moment. And then our inboxes are permanently full of invitations to webinars. The problem with these webinars is they're mostly during the day. So I sign up to every webinar that's relevant for me, not because I want to watch it during the day, but because I want to get the recording. And then I take the recording and I use AI to summarize it and read it back to me. If I don't have time to read a book that I'm interested in, then I use applications like Headway so that I can, when I'm taking my dogs out for a walk, I can listen to it in 10 minutes. It's about finding the time to invest in yourself. And that time is often outside of 9 to 5. And then it's about maximizing that time and reading the right content and the right resources. But, there's so much of it. But, if we don't do it for ourselves, then nobody's going to do it for us. So we have to take responsibility for that because we owe it to our customers.
That's exactly it. And this next question is a little rhetorical because I pretty much know your answer. What emerging technologies or trends do you believe will significantly impact the IT services industry in the next few years?
Yeah, I think you're right. You know the answer to that. Yeah. I knew as you were asking that question what the answer to that was. Everybody who is in our industry is probably going to listen to this podcast and they're going to know what I'm going to say. People need to realize the what's coming our way and how important and evolutionary and revolutionary this is that AI is going to be. I remember, so we said earlier on, right? AI has been around, generative AI has been around a couple of years. I went to a conference, not this Christmas before, in Sundance in Utah. And there's a guy called David Cavendish there, and he's the CEO of an organization called Capacity. And I often requote David. David said that it took something like 30 years for internet to grow from dial-up 56K to fiber 1 gig to the home. 30 years. Mm-hmm. He said back then, in 2 years' time, we will look back on today's AI and we will compare it to dial-up internet. That's how fast it's going to move. A year on, we are already looking at the AI of a year ago and realize so a year ago it was ChatGPT. Yeah. Now look, AI is within every application that we use in business, and there's a new application that we see every day that we look at and we think, wow, I'm going to start using this, and in no time I won't be able to live without it. Yeah. I started using one a couple of weeks ago that we tried on a 7-day trial, and we now subscribe to it because what it does, it integrates with Outlook and it answers our emails. When somebody sends me an email and asks me if I can do a meeting, it will actually put an email in the email all of the times that I'm available for a meeting. So it attends my meetings and it will send meeting notes to people. It will give me a couple of versions of the emails for me to either edit or send. I think the promise then was I will save you an hour a day. I think it's already saved me more than an hour a day. But there's new applications coming out all the time. I like to say that the way AI is going to change our industry is so significant that it's like a tsunami. And the tsunami is not on the horizon, it's actually at our feet. And we have a choice in our industry, and our choice is we either get on board the surfboard and we ride it and we have a great time and we become part of it, or we stand there and let it just wash us away. Because if we don't get on that surfboard, that's what will happen. And that's the challenge that businesses are going to face, right? So there's a lot of businesses now looking and thinking, is it too late? Have we already missed it? Well, what they need to be doing is thinking about how AI could help them save money, make money, be more efficient, all of those things, which they need to be looking at from a traditional technology perspective anyway. So AI is just a new technology. But if they're not looking and thinking about it, their competition are. So they need to have a plan. But it moves so fast that the technologies that their competition may be taking today might not be the technologies that they need to get them on their path, but at least they're on the path. So they need to be getting on the path, and it's our role to do that. And I think, in summary, answering that question, it absolutely is AI. And I think that it moves so fast now. We saw a change only a couple of weeks ago, where a new application came into the market that it was suggested that it was actually going to change the whole generative AI industry. I don't think it'll be the first time it happens. I think 6 months from now, something else will happen, and we'll look back and we'll go, wow, that massively changed as well. And it's a bit, Do you remember Moore's Law? How I can't remember what the details of Moore's Law were. It's something about capacity will double every 2 years, and then we stopped referring to Moore's Law because it became irrelevant. I think we will look back on AI and we'll just go, in 5 years, we'll say, first year it was that, year 1.5 it was that, and it just continued to do that. And so the way we look at technology from a couple of years from now will be very different today, and it will be primarily driven by AI.
I agree. And I think that a few years back, probably 5 years, we started hearing the term big data. There's a lot of big data out there. That's really what people are getting out of automation is what is important. And every platform that we use, whether it's UCaaS or a CRM or an ERP, because when you have different disparate platforms that don't connect or aren't integrated, now you don't have a full picture of data. And that is so important as a business to understand your data, whether it's internal employee, what are they saying, what do they need, what's working, what's not working, and then thinking about the external clients. What do they need? How do we talk to our customers? What are they saying? What do they want? I remember one of our UCaaS providers sold and moved it's a Texas company. I think you probably heard the story of they made cowboy boots, and they didn't make square toe cowboy boots. And they moved to this solution, and they started looking at the request because they finally had access to the data. And they found out that they had all these requests for square-toed cowboy boots. And so they started going, well, why don't we make square-toed cowboy boots? Now it's their number one selling product. It's like, that's the difference that people need to embrace in using AI or just using some of these tools is where am I on the journey of, and I'm not saying everybody just rush to the cloud. There's a lot of hybrid. There's a lot of, you've got to look at voice data in your cloud services and say, where am I? And then how do I move forward logically, making decisions with data wherever I can? I feel like that's the real shift that we as agents bring to the table, because we're not married to one product. We can agnostically come in and say, hey, you still have a premise phone system? Great, let's talk about that. Is it budgeted? What are you doing? And we can really kind of be neutral versus somebody else just walking in and saying, here's what you need. This is what you need. And what if it's not the right product? Because it's expensive to move to the cloud. And if you get there and you have to move somewhere else because it wasn't right, that's really painful. Yeah. It is. And you're right. There's still customers out there that will say things along the lines of, we'll move to the cloud if it helps us save us money. And we have to stop them there and say, let's have a conversation about what the cloud can give you. Yeah. Forget about the saving money, because you know what, if I'm honest, it's probably going to cost you more money. And the reason it's going to cost you more money is because you're actually investing in your strategy, and the cloud can deliver you so much more than your previous technology strategy did. We were dealing with a customer recently that it's a law firm, a family law firm that had started going around buying other small family law firms. So very quickly, they'd gone from 30 lawyers to nearly 1,000 lawyers. And the reason they were doing it is because they wanted to inject new technology across the organization that they were building to provide economies of scale. Because they were thinking about buying a business, making it more efficient, eventually selling it on. As they were doing this, and they started to look at the technologies that they're going to use, they saw an opportunity. And the opportunity was to create a better law experience at scale for customers. Today, they are a law firm that does a lot of outbound marketing. So they do a lot of marketing on things like Facebook. So people who are looking for support around their legal challenges, consumer type challenges. It could be divorce. It could be will writing. Et cetera, et cetera.
they will see an advert on Facebook, and they'll contact this organization, and this organization is using a Salesforce platform. So they have a contact center team that do the triage and the first conversation with the customer. They'll book a meeting with a lawyer, and then they'll call the customer back on the given day, and they'll say, are you ready to speak to the lawyer? And they'll put them through to the lawyer who's got all of the details from the CRM. And that's revolutionary from a law perspective, right?
Yeah.
To be proactive in terms of outbound marketing. But it's because a trusted advisor went in there and said to them, if you take this platform from a CRM perspective, you take this platform from a contact center perspective, and you take this platform from a back office perspective, you can join them all up and they will deliver on your strategy. Whereas, as you're right, Catherine, if you'd had a CRM salesperson go in, a UC salesperson, a contact center salesperson go in, they each would have said, that's what you need, without any regard to the other applications and how they all fit together. That's the value that we provide.
Yeah, definitely. And I think really coming in with that neutral perspective of really listening and understanding the pain, and then crafting and designing the solution on the whole. You may only take baby steps or phase one, because you can't do everything all at once. So maybe you have to do the UCAS first. Maybe you have to do, then next is the CCAS. But it's the integration that makes the magic when you start integrating that data and looking at the data to say, what is it telling me? Because it'll tell you what you need to do. It'll say, ooh, this is a priority, because that's what data does. Yeah. So let's reflect on your journey with 186 Cloud. What are your accomplishments that you're most proud of?
I think the thing I'm most proud of, there's a few steps to the things I'm proud of. The first thing was the challenge, the first challenge. There is a government body here called the Department of Trade and Industry, and they publish statistics every year on business success and business failure. And the same statistic has stayed the same for a long time, and that is 71% of businesses fail within the first 3 years, right? And we are now 4 years into our journey. So, hopefully, we've crossed those, past those initial challenges, and we're here to stay, right? Mm-hmm. Because we have a long-term ambition. I remember when I started this business back in October 2020. My plan was to start this business and run it for 10 years. And in 10 years from then, to then think and look at it and go, okay, what do I do next? Is it time for me to do something else? Is it time for me to pass it on to somebody, et cetera, et cetera? I still wake up every day and I still think to myself, okay, the plan is I've got 10 years ahead of me. So nothing's changed. So every day for me is a challenge. Every week is, I think about our annual and our quarterly objectives that we're looking to achieve, and there's always something new to achieve. Mm-hmm. We're ambitious. We want to be here to help customers achieve their ambitions. You quoted a statistic of the American market at the start of our conversation where you said something like 60 to 70% of customers in the mid-market buy their technology solutions using a trusted advisor that help them understand the marketplace. That's not true here. Less than 10%, I'd say, of customers here use people like us to help them understand the technology marketplace. So that's a challenge. I want to help the industry here get to 60 to 70%. The US industry has been around, 30, 40 years? I started it here for Intelisys in 2016. So my math is right, 9 years into it. We've got 20 years to go. I don't think I'll quite make that 20 years. I think I'll need to take a rest, but I'll achieve a significant portion of it. So it's my ambition to really get this industry rocking.
Oh, well, I knew I wanted a London office. And there's a story behind that, right?
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
So, Stephen, where can listeners follow up with your work or learn more about 186 Cloud?
We're going to be doing a number of things this year. We've got a partner dinner planned for March, sponsored by one of our vendors that we love and appreciate very much, because without them, we wouldn't be able to do half of the stuff we do. Mm-hmm. We've got a customer dinner planned for May with another one of our vendors. And that's something that we're doing that's different. Again, actually holding customer dinners so that customers can come and hear from the vendors, and they can talk to each other about the journeys they're on in relation to CX and AI. So if you want to come, if you're a customer and you want to find out what's going on in our world, and you'd like to come to one of our dinners, reach out to me. Go to 186cloud.com. All of our contact details are there. You can see a lot of what's going on. We produce regular tech talk videos and write stuff and publish it on there. So yeah, that's the main place to find us.
Awesome. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us today. You can find Stephen on LinkedIn at Stephen Hackett, and 186cloud.com is where you can find him on the web. So thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you, Catherine, for inviting me. I've really enjoyed this session.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for listening to Symplicity Conversations. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and visit us at thesimplepodcast.com to connect and learn more about inspiring leaders like Stephen. See you next time.